the record show that all city commissioners are present. First item up is the order of business. Mr. Winningham, are there any changes to our order of business?
Good afternoon, Mr. President and Commission. There's one change to this evening's agenda. We are adding H to our paragraph 3 administration. So all the reports will be under H, and we are inserting G as an action item. That'll be discuss the ABC lease for consideration.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham on the amended order of business? I look for a motion on the amended order of business.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any comments, questions? All in favor of the amended order of business state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Our next item up is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that commissioners wish to discuss with city staff? There are no items. I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
A motion to approve consent agenda by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We will move into the administration and finance part of the agenda. First item up is the liquor license amendment. City Administrator Winningham will be handling this.
Mr. President and Commissioners, before you is a amended liquor license for the Dickinson Elks Lodge, which amends their time to be open on Sunday. That is the amendment for approval.
Any questions on the amended liquor license for the Dickinson Elks Lodge, 1137?
Mr. President, I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further discussion, questions on the liquor license amendment for Dickinson Elks Lodge? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman? Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up is we have a proclamation. And this is a great organization and event that happens every year since I've been here. And this is our Giving Hearts Day that happens in our community. And I have a proclamation here, but we also have some individuals in the audience with the organization. Do they wish to speak? Do you have anything? I love putting you guys on the spot, so.
That was a challenge if we was going to speak, Mr. President. I'm DL Jordan. I'm speaking on behalf of the Southwest Coalition that we have for Giving Hearts Day. Giving Hearts Day is an online fundraising program for up to 500 charities across North Dakota and western Minnesota. It is 100% online, and we're seeking your support at the day of proclamation for the event on February 11th.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation then. In observance of Giving Hearts Day in Dickinson, North Dakota, whereas in 2008, Giving Hearts was created by the Dakota Medical Foundation and the Impact Foundation as the first one-day virtual fundraising event of its kind in the region. And whereas the goals of Giving Hearts Day are to raise awareness of the charitable nonprofit sector and its organizations in North Dakota and western Minnesota, to assist these organizations in better telling their mission, stories, and to promote online giving and to provide donors the opportunity to multiply the results of their giving. And whereas this 24-hour online fundraising event is dedicated to inspiring online donations for charities at impactgiveback.org, and whereas Giving Hearts Day is powerful because it inspires so many to give for the first time or contribute to the newly discovered charities. And whereas the charitable nonprofit sector provides much needed services that improve the quality of life for so many in our community. And whereas the charitable nonprofit sector supports individuals and families with quality programs, materials, and funds that promote and encourage self-sufficiency. And whereas all of the above listed benefits serve to strengthen the fiber of our community and to make it richer for all residents. And whereas, in order to provide these benefits, charities who provide these services need ongoing funds in order to provide long-term sustainable services our residents in need. And whereas these charities have demonstrated a need for collaboration and resources and have joined together for this one-day online fundraiser. Now therefore, I, Scott Decker, President of the Dickinson, North Dakota, do hereby declare February 11th, 2021, Giving Hearts Day in Dickinson, North Dakota, and call upon public officials, business, and community leaders and educators, and encourage all Dickinson citizens to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs in order to recognize the charitable nonprofit sector and their staffs and volunteers, and who provide essential services that improve the quality of life for all of our citizens. Acknowledge that the charitable nonprofit sector is beneficial in Dickinson and Southwest North Dakota because it improves life, outcomes, and strengthens our community. It promotes the support of charitable nonprofit sectors that equip our citizens with tools needed to lead safe, healthy, and productive lives, and support Giving Hearts Day and take action by volunteering or making financial donations to local charities in Dickinson and Southwest North Dakota at givingheartsday.org. Now that I've read that proclamation, I would look for a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the
Yep.
Giving Hearts Day proclamation.
We have a motion to approve the Giving Hearts Day proclamation by Commissioner Soboluk.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sign this. Send this down to Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you.
And here's to hope a very successful Giving Hearts Day. Okay, our next item up is we have a CDBG grant for ADA bathrooms for Able Incorporated at the T-Rex. Deputy City Administrator Carlson.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. A Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, application is being pursued by Able Incorporated for the improvements and addition of ADA bathrooms with universal changing places at the T-Rex Mall. Able Incorporated purchased the T-Rex Mall in December of 2019. A public hearing was held at City Hall on December 18th last year for this project with no opposition. Able Incorporated has requested the City of Dickinson to act as the sponsoring unit of government for the project at T-Rex Mall for the installation of the bathrooms and changing stations. The City of Dickinson, as the fiscal agent, will be the applicant for the required CDBG grant that comes from the North Dakota Department of Commerce Division of Community Services. Able then would be the subrecipient of the grant. The cost of the project is $130,000 plus the administrative fee of $19,500, and then the local match, which would come from Able Incorporated, of $15,200, would bring the total of the grant to $164,700. Able is requesting the President of the Commission to sign the sponsorship forms, including but not limited to the final application, citizen participation plan, code of conduct, and resolutions. After the packet information has been signed, The CDBG grant is still contingent on the approval of the North Dakota Department of Commerce Division of Community Services. And I'll stand for any questions that there may be concerning the application of the grant.
Commissioners, the resolution is in your packet. There is also a resolution of sponsorship within your packet.
I just have one clarifying question. So this is, we are just a sponsoring agency. We're not giving them the money. We're just the sponsoring agency in this.
Correct. City of Dickinson for the Southwest area is the government entity that will receive the funds from the state or Fed that then disperses that money to the subrecipient.
Okay.
This
So we
being
do
able.
give them the money, but we get it from somewhere
Right.
else and transition it.
We are a transfer.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Linda,
Yes.
is the application still running through Roosevelt Custer Regional Council?
Yes, as far as I understand, that ABLE is going through them as the applicant, through Roosevelt Custer Council, and then we are the fiscal agent as the city. But we still are on the applicant because we are the city that we have to take the responsibility of those funds.
So would they have to be on this application?
I do not believe they have to be. The other two grants that I did do with the Roosevelt Custer Council for other CDBG grants, the city was the applicant, but Roosevelt Custer did the help to the applicant in getting all the form signs, setting up the public hearing and all this and that. This one isn't running that way, where ABLE is doing most of the work for the application and everything.
And that's why Rayon's on it.
Correct.
So, Mr. President and Commissioner, I'll just make one comment. If we do approve this as by resolution, that the city would consider how the application is proceeding, but we're essentially asking for approval to proceed with the application. And we can discuss internally as a city staff of how best to do that with the administrative procedure, meaning that it may not be Roosevelt Custer that is the administrative agent. So that's something that won't affect the grant in total, but I think it's part of an internal process. And so we're really asking for the approval to apply for the grant, and when we'll work through the internal staffing procedure for that.
Any other questions? This is Resolution 04-2021. Are there any more questions? Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion on 04-2021.
I'll move to approve Resolution 04-2021.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Walla, a second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further questions, comments for staff? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Our next item up is the municipal code amendment. This is to our tobacco, and I do think this has an ordinance already on it. Am I correct?
President Decker, this would be a new
Okay.
ordinance moving forward.
Okay, so this will be 1708.
Correct.
This is ordinance 1708. This is the amendment, or the consideration to approve the first reading of ordinance 1708, which is an amendment to our current municipal code. So, City Attorney Wenko, you'll be handling this.
Thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. Before you, you have a draft ordinance addressing the specific code sections for tobacco regarding grounds for suspension and revocation of an authority to sell tobacco within city limits. As you recall, we met recently and had a work session regarding these items based on discussions that were had with the tobacco retailers as well as Southwest District Health. These modifications that you see in this ordinance come from those discussions. I will note that this does mirror, in some respects, the alcohol compliance part of that code section. And we do have it drafted so that in the event an employee does obtain a tobacco server training program that would relieve them, and the employer, excuse me, of a violation. So that mirrors the alcohol compliance part of it with regard to the city code. So these amendments, again, are based on the discussions had with Southwest District Health and tobacco retailers, and result in a compromise between both of those groups. And the city staff would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Wenko. Any questions for Mrs. Wenko on 1708? There are no questions. I'd look for a motion on 1708.
This first reading then?
Correct. This is the first reading, and then there'll be a public hearing on the second reading.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance 1708.
We have a motion to approve 1708 by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Oderman. Any questions, comments? Again, there will be a public hearing on the second reading.
Would be at the next meeting, correct?
Yeah, that'll be at our next meeting in February. There are no questions or comments. We'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla? Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up is we have Building Inspection Services Agreement with Stark County, and this will be handled by City Administrator Winningham.
And Mr. President and Commissioners, before you is a building and inspection services agreement between City of Dickinson and Stark County. It has been signed today by Stark County at their commission meeting. In essence, that the county desires to contract with the city to provide building inspection services for the county. Within that scope of work, the city shall provide the following services to the unincorporated areas and the extraterritorial zones. And if you can read through there, it essentially, we provide the building permits and items that are listed in this scope of work to the county within the ETZ, and the city is prepared to assume this agreement and provide those services based on your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham or staff on this agreement with Stark County?
I do have a monetary question here. It says 70% of the permit fees will come to the city and 30% to the county. Is that enough to cover our costs, I'm assuming, or do we?
Currently, we were essentially, in essence, performing those functions with the county. So this just provides an agreement that we actually will receive some money for work we potentially were already doing. So this does provide the cost sharing, and I believe this agreement is sound, and it's a term for 1 year, and we would negotiate a renewal when we understand better what if we do incur costs over this 70-30.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Just a comment, I just think this is a good step forward with us, the city, being able to work with the county on some future stuff here. It's a good beginning here. So we have the staff to help them out, and we'll get some of the permit fees to stay here in Stark County instead of going out of town. So it's good. With
Okay,
that,
if there are no other questions, I'd look for a motion.
I'd move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up, we have some abatements, and City Assessor Hirschfeld will be presenting. We have an abatement from Frederickson Byron Law Firm. will be the first item on.
Good evening, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Let's start off with lightening this load up a little bit for tonight. After submitting the material that I did, conversations with the council for the owners, they would appreciate if we would remove Sierra Ridge, RFM Trey Jefferson, and RFM Trey Lincoln Apartments from tonight. They believe they've got a little more information they can send over and to simplify things, and instead of this getting put a dump tonight or at the next meeting, they're going to send it over to me this week. We'll take another look at this and then bring them back at our next meeting, which should keep us on track for the county meeting in March. And to keep things simple, they are in agreement with the staff recommendations for MDI Limited Partnership number 76, number 112, number 93, and number 103. So all of those we are under agreement with. So with that, I'll open it up to you if you have any questions for me.
I just had a question. What's a pilot exemption?
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Oh, okay.
So when they built that, instead of being subject to the taxes at the time, they negotiated a payment. And so they pay a set amount with roughly a 2% increase is what it was generally then over the course of 15 or 20 years or whatever their negotiation was, and they do that instead of paying taxes. Probably a good deal at the time. May not be quite so good right now for them in the downturn, but I imagine it all equals out at the end anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hirschfield.
So our, Mrs. Wenko, do we need to take up each one of the MDIs separately?
Mr. President, I would recommend you do so, considering you have different owner, different applicants. As far as...
Even though they were in agreement with...
Correct. So the MDI LP number 76, that one would be one motion, and then
Okay.
112, and then
I was
93.
wondering if we had to take each parcel out of that.
No, no, no. I would just recommend you do them by owner.
So we have an agreement on the MDIs. You're coming back with Sierra Ridge and Jefferson and Lincoln.
Correct.
Right. And the S&B Dickinson Apartments, I guess that's those three looped together, right, under the LLC or?
Yes, yeah, the S&B Dickinson Apartments, that's the ownership of Sierra Ridge.
Okay, so they basically own those other three. So. Okay, Mr.
President.
You have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Hirschfield, I was just curious if you could very quickly summarize the process that you and your staff go through on this, just for those in the audience and those watching at home.
Absolutely, and we've done a lot of abatements, and they get to be a grind, but I appreciate the process, and it comes through for this here, and I hope for future ones it makes it easier to understand why I don't always agree with them. The reason for the abatement process is to allow a correction to be made for an error and go back up to 2 years to recoup some of the taxes then that the property owner paid in overages. In the case of the MDI properties that we are recommending a decrease, these were low-income properties in 2014 when they were revalued at that time, and it's something we're certainly going to pay more attention to in our next commercial revaluation. But we have a 35% obsolescence that we give to low-income properties. Some of those, I mean, they're not all created equal, but just to simplify things, I mean, that gets most of those pretty close. It certainly did with these here. So in reviewing that, when they're saying our income doesn't support the value you have, a lot of times we say, well, that might be management. But in this case, most of these properties had some sort of a deed restriction on those properties that prevents them from having the ability to earn what non-restricted properties. So after reviewing that, we saw the deed restrictions, recognized they weren't carrying the 35% obsolescence that most of the other low-income properties were. We applied that obsolescence, rechecked income, and now everything is a lot closer. Our cost approach is a lot closer to what their income was showing. In the case of the MDI Limited Partnership 112 properties, many of those do not have a deed restriction on them. A couple of them did, so 2 of those properties will see a reduction out of that group. But at the end of the day, the other ones didn't, and the income I mean, they actually had a little stronger income on those properties than on some of their others, so going by the income approach, by putting this obsolescence on, it actually might be a little bit undervalued, but in the scheme of things, you realize that not all properties are created equal, and, you know, and that's kind of how it shakes out, but that doesn't mean we don't treat all properties equally. I hope that answered.
No, thank you.
your question, Commissioner.
I just think it's important for people to understand the process, so.
But hopefully then when we get to the last two, or the last property here, the reason why I don't recommend a change then, you know, is supported as well.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld or city staff? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and go through the recommendations from city staff on these 4 properties. The first one up is MDI LP number 76-2018.
Mr. President, I'd move to approve city staff recommendations on MDI LP number 76.
We have a motion to approve the city staff recommendation by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Ms. Sobola.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The next item up is MDI LP number 112-2018. Again, there are 5 no changes and 2 changes recommended by city staff.
Mr. President, I move to approve city staff recommendations on MDI LP number 112.
We have a motion to approve city staff recommendations by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Soboluk. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Ms. Soboluk,
Aye.
Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next item up is MDI LP number 93-2018. There's recommendation by city staff for 5 adjustments.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the staff recommendations for MDI LP number 93.
We have a motion by Commissioner Frederick to approve the city staff recommendations on MDI LP number 93.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman,
Aye.
Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mr. Soboluk. Mr. Soboluk, excuse me.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Sorry about that. Brain locked. Tongue too. Next item up is MDI LP number 103.
I just have a question on this one, if you don't mind. So if they're doing payment in lieu of taxes, was that not set up before this year? Or you were saying that started a while back? And so my question is if this started a while back, are we abating any of the price for them, price points for them?
Mayor Decker, Commissioner Soboluk, the way I understand the payment in lieu of taxes, that was put on, I believe, prior to construction or about the same time. And so that was all negotiated ahead of time. Technically, they can abate the value that's on that. We can change the value. We can change the value to 0. It will not affect their taxes because they're making a payment that's been negotiated instead of paying taxes.
Okay.
And so that payment that they're having won't change. I will defer to Mrs. Wanko whether that can be renegotiated. That I don't know.
Well, and then so my question is why we're voting on it for an abatement if it's already been set up in the past? And maybe I'm completely out of line, but I was trying to fully grasp that.
And that's a good question. We may not have to take any action on those tonight. That was just, the abatement was, and I'll defer, I guess, to Mrs. Wenko. They filed the abatement on it. Maybe technically through that, we can change the value of those because we're abating the value. But usually the abatement's for tax purposes and it wouldn't have any tax implications, so it's kind of moot. But I guess the abatement is still out there.
So my understanding, they came in prior to construction and negotiated it with this board. Is that how they do that, or?
Correct.
I would say that's all before any of us, because.
Yeah, I've never seen one of these
I've been
before.
here since 2014, and first I've heard of this, so that had to be negotiated with city staff early on in the boom.
And there were some that had been done before I got here, and then I remember that there were a handful that were done after. But yeah, I'm certainly before any of you were seated. So.
And they probably looked at it as a benefit to them, because they were probably getting taxed at that rate at that time,
Sure.
and not knowing what.
The future would hold.
Right. And hedging that bet. So I don't know how we could change that, because it's kind of the gamble they took.
Correct, President Decker. The payment in lieu of taxes exemption by statute requires this particular process for the applicant to go through in order to even qualify for the pilot program. So whenever that occurred many, many years ago, they would have had to go through that in order to even be accepted into being allowed to do a pilot program. So yes, I mean, typically those are for 10, 20 years, depending on how they are initially applied for.
And for the city, they were probably looking at it, they got a big cash infusion up front,
Maybe.
or at least a guarantee of what they were gonna get.
So do we need to take action, do you believe? Are we actually going to adjust the values, or?
Mr. Hirschfeld, I guess a question for you. Based on what we see here in the chart, I do see that the numbers are different, but from what I'm also seeing here, you've got your pilot exemption for your staff recommendation based on the prior applicant, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so that these numbers are based on your recommendation because of the pilot exemption?
I really didn't work these up. I explained to the council for the property owners that there was a pilot on these, and like I did here, that we can change the value to anything, but it won't affect the taxes. They said they had to go back to the ownership and discuss that. They came back and said, we don't have an issue with where you're at. I guess I was left here thinking, well, we'll take no action. We certainly can. If that's a concern, I mean, we could probably table it for the next meeting as well and dig a little deeper.
We're not really approving anything.
Yeah, we'll end up in the same place because there'll be no change in their pilot. I think it was lower taxes was what their expectation was when they started this process.
Mrs. Winkle, what would be the proper motion to make if we weren't going to make any action here, or if we just wanted to?
Continue.
Are you saying, Commissioner Oderman, is the question to not address this, or to basically leave it as it is?
Correct, not address it, because, I mean, there's really no action to take.
I think at that point, you've obviously discussed it, and then I don't believe that there would be an action item to take at that point, because you're not
Okay.
taking an action with regard to a commission decision. So for purposes of the meeting minutes, I think you've discussed it. You've come to the conclusion that the city isn't required to take any action because of the pilot exemption, and whatever that exemption currently sits at is what the value is going to be moving forward.
And I guess if they feel that they need to bring this back, they will.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Hirschfeld, I would just say, look a little bit more into this, what the pilot exactly, if there is any effect if you change values. So.
I'll certainly do that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, it is, we're just gonna have to ask Mr. Hirschfeld to sit down for a little bit, because it is 5 o'clock. So we do have public hearing and public comments, not on the agenda at 5 p.m. And this is for anybody that wants to come to the podium. State your name. If there are any items you wish to speak that are not on our agenda this evening, it is the time for public comments. You can also call in to 701-456-7006. there somebody in the conference? Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Kimberly King. I'm with Halliburton, so I was actually holding the case for the county
Okay.
for our property.
All right. Thank you, Ms. King. Is there anyone in the audience that has any public comments they wish to come forward, state their name, and let us know if it's not on the agenda this evening? Any public comments? Come forward, please.
Hi, my name is Melanie Dishaw. I just moved from Minnesota in October back to my home state of North Dakota. Happy to be here. The problem is parking and garbage pickup. I live on the notorious 10th Avenue West by the Oasis Hotel and all the larger building there that's now rooms for the college kids and all that stuff. And what happened, I have got a whole bunch of notes, but I won't read them to you. What happened is at first I thought that I could have some parking in the front of my house and my sidewalk, and I would block it off. In all fairness, I would block off a little bit when I was getting company to save the spot for people. And I finally gave up on that but then I found out that when I put my garbage out at the end of my sidewalk, the neighbors would take the garbage and put it over to my other neighbor's driveway, or they would park, if I just put it into the sidewalk, they would park it there and then it wouldn't get picked up. And I'm nervous, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Okay. So from October to the end, till around Christmas time, I just kind of put up with it. And then I talked to the one guy in the white pickup. I didn't know who he was, but I put a post-it note on his vehicle, asked him to call me so we could talk about it. So he called, and he was upset that my garbage is out there because he told me I didn't have the right to put the garbage out in front of my house. It had to be over in my neighbor's driveway, and I disagreed with him. So after that, I emailed the city and asked permission, and I got an email back from Rachel Shoemaker telling me that I did have the right to put it out at the end of my sidewalk, and that if I had any other disputes with this, I should, contact the police department. So, well, I did. So I drove down to the police department and talked to a very nice police officer and explained everything to him. I mean, even like at Christmas time, I had company over, and I had an 85-year-old relative that had to walk a block to get to my house because there's so much traffic there. So anyway, I said my case, and he asked me if he would like him to call and talk to the guy, and I took a picture of the license plate, and it was the white pickup. And he called the guy and found out it was Austin McLean Boswell, age 22, and he said that he lived directly across the street from me. So it wasn't the Oasis group, it was across the street. And that particular property, I pulled the property taxes. There's 2 homes there, and they're both owned by LLCs. They're all rentals. One's got like 5 bedrooms, another one's got 4 bedrooms. So they've got 9 possible rentals for that one property. That's only like 7,000. It's a small lot, and apparently there's no place for them to park. And anyway, I don't understand. I mean, it's a parking issue that's turned into a garbage issue to the point where, like this, here's a picture on 127 last Wednesday. Garbage is picked up early Thursday morning, so I've just gotten to the point where I would just wait on Wednesday when there's an open spot and just put my garbage out there. This is what it comes down to. He will move my garbage off the street. He could park anywhere, but he will park right in front of my garbage. And I went back to the police department, and they said there's nothing they can do. And so then I drove down and I talked to the lady that with the garbage, and she said that there's nothing that they can do either. And it's kind of said, this is an ongoing issue with parking around the college. 2 weeks, my garbage didn't even get picked up because they move it up on the sidewalk, and then the garbage truck doesn't pick it up. but yet I'm in charge. I believe I have to clean my sidewalks off, I have to clean my lawn mowed, but I can't even have my garbage out the end of my sidewalk. And I think it's a city problem, or it's the owners who own the houses that are renting these, and they're both LLCs. Don't they have to provide parking for their people if they rent them out?
That's a Mr. Schwinn question.
Our building and codes individual is not here this evening, so.
Yeah,
Oh, there,
we're good.
yeah, there he is. Mr. Schwint, do they have to provide parking?
Mr. President, I can, your last name, ma'am, was it?
Dishaw, Melanie Dishaw, D-E-S-C-H-A-M-P.
Okay.
And I've got the reports that I went to the police department. I pulled the property taxes of those.
I'm going to give you my card so that this is a meeting we can just have. Come in and talk to me personally.
Okay.
And then we can sort through the next action.
She-
Because I think your
Yeah.
information is compelling. I think you're right. We have to sort something out so that you can get your trash service that you pay for and we provide.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so please, meet with me, and I think we can get this worked out.
Okay. And I'm here because Rachel had said this is an ongoing
Yeah.
problem, and she suggested this is where I come to address it.
It's good. I'm glad you came.
Okay.
You know, ideally, you
Oh,
could
we're
call
happy
us.
you're here. I mean,
Thank you.
we want all our citizens to be good
Okay.
neighbors. And
I-
if somebody's purposely doing this to you, then we have an issue and it needs to be addressed.
I've owned 3 homes in my lifetime, 2 in North Dakota, and I've worked on the road, so I've rented houses in other states and stuff. I have never been treated this way before in my life. I've never gone to the cops for anything, and I'm sure as I could never come to a city meeting for anything. So this is, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, we will work at a remedy for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Does anybody else have anything they wish to come forward? It's not on the agenda. Let us know about it. That's what this time is for, exactly what she just brought up. You need to know these things. Anyone? Now we'll close the public comments part of the agenda. The next item we will go into is we'll go back to Mr. Hirschfeld. We have the abatement for the Halliburton property.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. The last 2 that we have for tonight is Halliburton for 2018 and 2019. And I believe we have Ms. King on the line for Halliburton, and I can let her speak to her property. But in essence, I believe she's looking for a change in value, especially after the State Board of Equalization supported her 2020 decrease. And she's looking for that value to be placed back to 2018 and 19. I don't know that I agreed with the 2020 decision, and certainly don't going back that far just because of the different marketing time that we were in. But I guess at this time I'd defer to Ms. King to tell her side of the story and be available for any questions you have.
Ms. King?
Yes, I'm
If you have any testimony, please provide it to the City Commission.
Yeah, sure. Let me lower my volume on the computer. 1 second. Okay, I just want to thank the commission for allowing us to speak this evening. So, yeah, we protested our 2020 valuation. And I guess let me take a step back and give you guys just a little bit of background on the property. So this facility was built, we started construction in 2013. That was due to increased drilling demand in the state. If you guys recall, I think drilling demand was completely through the roof, and it was like 180 active rigs at the time. And so we decided to expand our footprint in the state to the Dickinson area. So we completed construction on the property in 2014. Unfortunately, towards the end of 2014 and 15, the oil and gas industry went through in a downturn. And so that, of course, affected our business. So we actually closed this facility by 2016, we closed the property, and it remained closed until 2018. When we reopened the property, we were not at full capacity or anywhere near that. We were actually somewhere around 30% of capacity in 2018. In 2019, we were reduced even further, and we were operating out of one of 6 buildings that we have. And so, we understand from the assessor's perspective, this is a spanking brand new property. But when you look at, and what I don't think that Mr. Hirschfeld has given any consideration to, which the state did in our 2020 appeal, was for economic obsolescence. And so I think just as important as it is to look at physical depreciation and wear and tear of a property, we also have to look at what's happening in the economics of a particular industry. And the fact that our facility was built, for a specific intended purpose, the maximum value of that facility is useful primarily to that industry. And the industry, from what I just described, was going through an economic downturn. So even though we spent more than $20 million on constructing this facility, it's lost value because of what the industry is going through. And so in 2020, when we appealed to the city, the county, and got to the state level where they did an individual assessment of the property themselves. And due to the fact that the property was vacant, they took that into consideration, the vacancy of the property. And so that's what we are basically asking for in 2018 and 2019, because even though the facility wasn't closed completely, we're only operating out of a small fraction of the facility. And this is over 100,000 square foot facility. So more than half of it is vacant. And so we felt like Mr. Hirschfeld should have given more consideration to that. And so that's pretty much the basis of it. We wound up selling the property this year. We sold it for $6 million. When we received a broker valuation in November of 2019, that valuation told us that we could potentially sell the property. A good estimate or range would have been between $8 and $10 million. The state found that with taking into giving the adjustment for the obsolescence, it brought our value to $10 million, approximately $10.8 million. And so that's the reason why we're asking for that value for 2018 and 2019, because we believe that that is closer to, that's more representative of market value for those years versus the excess of $20 million, which is what we were on the roll for.
Thank you, Ms. King. When you reopened in 2018, were you at full operational capacity, or were you?
We were at about 30%.
30% in 2019?
2019, I would estimate around 16%. It was less than 10%. We only had one building at that time that was operational.
Commission, are there any other questions for Ms. King? Ms. Hirschfeld, your recommendation? I see there is a reduction, but not to what the applicant is asking for.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, after our review in 2020, we calculated out, I'm trying to remember, roughly 5.7% of the value based off of excess land, excess pavement that wasn't being used. It's part of the economic obsolescence she's talking about that we did consider. I mean, if it was, running full capacity trucks all over the place, maybe you don't give them that excess, but there's a large part of that property that just isn't being used if it's not being used fully, and so we recognize that. A few of the other points that I wanted to bring out, the valuation dates are February 1, 2018, February 1, 2019 for both of these years. She's referencing a sale that occurred in 2020 after a pandemic, after the oil crash because of that, when oil was on December 31, 2019 at $60. It had been increasing since the bust. We were building more homes, values were going up. That's referenced by our commercial valuation being at 87%. There was nothing else that was carrying economic obsolescence in the city. No reason to consider that Halliburton should either. If they're not using it fully, you know, is that part of the oil? Is that part of their business model? You know, they hadn't been in at any other time to contest their value, so there wasn't really any reason to think that additional economic obsolescence should be placed on this. When I was talking about being equitable in our valuation, adding that 35% obsolescence to those other apartments. Similarly, there's no economic obsolescence on the property to the south of this one, which was Slumberjay, now BJ's. There's no economic obsolescence on the Walmart, on the Menards. They're all valued based off the cost approach. We consider, you know, the age of the building, all of that's taken into consideration. At no time did anybody point out that there's an error in the properties, the buildings that we have there, that there's an error on the card due to that. It all goes back to economic obsolescence. She references the state and vacancy. It's not proper appraisal practice to put vacancy on a single tenant owner occupied building. It's not an income generating property. It doesn't have vacancy. It would be like suggesting that there's vacancy placed on a snowbird's house when they leave for Arizona for 6 months. Because the property's vacant doesn't mean it's worth less. Now, and that was part of my concern with where the state came with their value. That being said, it's a big property. There aren't many of them. There aren't any that sell on a regular basis up here, and certainly not in a true market transaction. Usually it's in a down market. The sale in Williston, one of the companies built a new structure across the road, didn't need it. So then you've got excess buildings like that, excess properties that serve this purpose. We didn't have that in Dickinson. We had no reason to believe at that time that additional economic obsolescence should have been placed on this. And so just knowing what we did at the time, had a new administration, had been elected in 2016, business was picking up, values were going up all over. There was no reason to suggest that there should have been obsolescence on this property. And with that, I'll entertain any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Any questions, Commissioners, for Mr. Hirschfeld on their reasoning for their recommendation is a decrease of abated, for both abated years of $1,184,600. So for 2018, their recommendation is to decrease the property to 20, well, I got two different figures here. So 19,268,500 for 2018, and then because of the valuation differential in 2019, with a reduction again of the 1.1 million to $20,004,900. So are there any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld or his staff, or any additional questions for Ms. King? Again, this board can have 4 possible motions. We can make no change, and we can keep it at the true and full valuation. We have the option to change the value to the owner's request of $10,888,100, which was the valuation placed upon it by the state in 2020. We can decrease both abated years by $1,184,600. Our 4th option is to change the value to some other amount that we feel is appropriate as the Board of Equalization.
What would the amount be, Mr. President, if we met in the middle of those two numbers?
Yes, you do the math quick.
15 million-ish.
first?
Because it is, I would just say it's a little troubling to me that we would be at that higher valuation when we do have a sale on the books now. But, in the event of no economic downturn, would that sale have taken place at that value? I mean, is that the true and fair value?
Well, for 2018, it would be $15,078,300. And again, it would be right around that same amount.
I'm just struggling that they're using the 2020 sale. I mean, these are captured in time. I mean, at 2018, we didn't know the building would sell for $6 million in 2020.
Yeah,
So why should we give them an abatement back to 2018,
yeah.
not knowing that? I struggle with that.
Ms. King, her reply was to Mr. Frederick's comment was the property was vacant for those in the audience or listening online. So.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I didn't realize you guys were just. But yeah, I mean, if I can speak and just kind of clarify that the property was not being fully utilized, and Mr. Hirschfeld mentioned that only income properties can suffer vacancy loss, but that is actually not true. Any property can suffer vacancy loss. I mean, because we're in effect acting as a tenant at our own property. And so if we can't fill the entire property or the majority of the property, I mean, that's still, you know, you will be looking at us differently or giving an unfair advantage to a tenant. And so that's really all I wanted to say, but that's the reason. It's because the property was not fully utilized. It actually wasn't even utilized. It was only utilized 30% in 18 and 15 to 20% in 2019.
I don't know. Can I go to the Board of Adjustment and say I only use 20% of my house?
You can.
I mean,
anybody can come in. I mean,
because there's definitely areas of my house that I use much more than others. I still have to pay my full property tax valuation.
I guess, commissioners, like I said, we have four options. We can make no changes. We can take the applicant's amount. We can use staff amount, which is a reduction of $1.1 million, almost 1.2, or we can come up with our own. I mean, we can, and if, you know, to your question, they both roughly would be, the 1 year would be $15,075,000, the other one would be $15,490,000. To your point and Mr. Hirschfeld's point, you're operating your business model for whatever property or say your house, however you use it, is still pay full amount. So. Ms. King, you have any other comments? No comments? No further comments from Ms. King, so leave it to the commissioners.
I mean, I would be opposed to going to that 2020 true and full value, that number of the 10.8 and 10.8 on both 2018 and 2019, but I wouldn't be opposed to.
Staff recommendation?
Well, even, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to the staff recommendation, but I wouldn't be opposed to maybe some middle ground here as well. Because we do have that, I mean, we do have the sale now. That gives us a little bit more information that we wouldn't have had in the event of this abatement request if it was still empty.
Explain your reasoning why 18 and 19 are different.
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick. That is a good question. I'm assuming, and I may have to go grab my book back there, but that there was a slight change because of market where we added 1 or 2% between years to get within tolerance. That's my working assumption, because I'm looking at that wondering with the same question, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of other reasons for me to change the value on this property other than doing a wholesale commercial increase to stay within tolerance.
When we had our review by the Vanguard, was this property included in that review or not?
All the commercial properties were included in that. The only ones that really saw much of a change were the income producing properties like our hotels, like our apartments. I think there was even an increase given to downtown, some of the downtown commercial or retail properties office. I can't remember which. Most of them didn't change, but the income went down and a few went up. And then after that, we had to after that was done, fall within tolerance as well. So that might explain that.
I mean, the only issue I have with the argument is if I build a 10,000 square foot building and then I realize we're not busy enough to occupy the whole 10,000, I only run my business out of 7,000. Now we're saying that that building's worth less. Well, I'm the owner and the occupant. I struggle with that. I mean, that's my own fault. That's not for building it too big.
And in a perfect world, there'd be adequate sales where we could go and see what the rest of the market is doing. We don't have that for properties of this type. What we compare to is everything else that was selling in Dickinson, which was selling well. You know, Dickinson itself did not have economic obsolescence. We were a growing market. There was no reason to think that any property would have not been increasing as well, including Halliburton. If oil field is coming back to Dickinson, the smaller shop office buildings were filling up with some of the smaller oil field companies. That's a sign of a positive market, and Halliburton would be part of a positive market. Whether oil of itself was doing well enough to help a large company or not, I'm not in that business. I don't know enough about it, but there wasn't any data to suggest that they weren't. They didn't come in here and say, hey, we're only 30% full right now. Can you do something for us? Right now, we're looking back after they've sold the property, and they're telling us that at that time we were 30%. I'm not saying she's not telling us the truth. I can't verify it. So in the absence of being able to verify information, I go with what I do know. And I know what our cost models were at the time.
Ms. King, you had a comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So two things. The gentleman's statement about a property being about 10,000 square feet, just because I don't have enough business to support it after it's been built, why does that devalue the property? And I think the difference here that I just want to, bring a contrast to is the fact that this isn't a 10,000 square foot property. This is 100,000 square feet of 6 buildings. And so this isn't that easy already to sell as it is because of the size of the property. So I just, wanted to make that contrast that it's not going to be easy to just, put it up for sale and just have someone be interested in it and purchase it just at the drop of a hat. Secondly, our buildings and our facilities, I should say, are built for our specific intended use. So, one thing that has to also be considered in the picture of selling a property like this is, yes, we may find someone who can use that warehousing space, but there's a lot of money and cost that we put into these buildings that are specifically intended for our use. And so, that again creates an issue because no one's going to want to pay what we paid. Let's say the property when it was built was worth $20 million, right? That's a safe assumption. But if we sell the property several years later, which is what has happened, we sell the property at that time to someone that's not in oil field services. Well, then that person is going to have to retrofit the space to fit their needs. So the $20 million that this property is worth actually isn't worth that to the purchaser, because now they have to come in and put more capital into the property to retrofit it to their needs. So they're not going to spend $20 million what it was worth to us. It may be another oilfield service company, but oilfield services is going through a downturn. So how many of those companies are going to be looking to purchase another property? So I think this is the scope of how we're looking at it. And we tried to, we tried to have those conversations with Mr. Hirschfeld, but he just wasn't receptive to that. I think the state actually was a little bit more receptive, especially being that they, especially being that they actually went out to the property and did a site tour and spoke to the property manager there. They got a better understanding of what had been happening and what led up to 2020. Also, we did actually protest this property in 2018, and I was not with Halliburton at that time, but my manager did. He let me know that we appealed it through a third-party firm, and the reason why we've handled it this year is because we don't feel like they were doing a really good job representing us and actually fighting for the value. And so that's the reason why, we have a little bit more, passionate behind, what we see happening day to day and trying to get these values where we really feel, it's a fair value. And so that's just additional information.
Thank you, Ms. King.
Mr. President, if I can make one response.
Mr. Hirschfeld.
She brings valid arguments. I won't deny that. But we can play the what-if game. Because if I recall, if Planner Hadley, there was a company who was actively looking at building a 300,000 square foot building in the Dickinson area to build tanks. This might have been perfect for them where they could have walked into it, but it wasn't available. It wasn't listed for sale at the time. So it's hard to tell whether that would have worked for them, whether they'd have paid $20 million for it. I don't know. But, there were opportunities. It was a different market then than what we have now.
I struggle with buying into the argument that, it was built for their needs and so it's not worth as much to somebody else. I get that, but I mean,
That's
everybody,
the risk you take.
Yeah, everybody builds the building to their needs, and I mean, that's just how businesses operate. When I build a building, I build it to my needs. When I sell it, it doesn't mean that the next guy is gonna use it the way I did. So I don't buy that argument, so.
And Mr. President and Commissioners, I'll just make a comment. Mrs. King, this is the City Administrator, Brian Winningham. We have these discussions, internal discussions as a staff, to ensure that our processes for the city are consistent across the board for businesses. And although we are thankful for businesses that are willing to be entrepreneurs and risk coming to the City of Dickinson when business is good, we also feel compelled to take care of our city by ensuring that we do our assessments consistently, and we can't unwind the clocks. So our discussions internally were about insurance premiums. And if my house doesn't burn down, I can't ask the insurance company for my fire insurance premiums back. This is very similar to the way Mr. Hirschfeld goes about his practice within the city. It's very thorough. There are room for some judgment, but in this capacity, I think he is on steady ground with how he is making these fundamental assessments. And we did review this property, but I will say that the discussion you're having is compelling. But I think going forward, we can't unwind the clocks completely. So that's just the statement I'll make.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any other comments, questions? Again, we have 4 options. Make no change, change value to owner request, decrease both abated gears by staff recommendation, or set a value according to this Board of Equalization.
I'll make a motion to move to the staff recommendation prices for the abatement values.
We have a motion by Commissioner Sobeluk to adopt the staff recommendations of a decrease for both abated gears by $1,184,600.
Second.
And the second is by Commissioner Oderman. Again, that was a motion by Commissioner Sobeluk, second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions by commissioners of staff? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. King. Yep, you too. Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you.
And you'll be bringing the other ones, I take it back to us to make it so it's appropriate, so we get this to the county.
That is our intent, that we've reviewed all the information the ownership has and stay on track for you, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item up is item G, and that is the lease agreement with American Bank Center. Just for the public's information, we are buying the American Bank Center insurance building, and in lieu of that, there are some changes that need to be made to that facility. So we need to stay in this facility until those changes are made, and that's for public safety and for public convenience, ADA bathrooms, the such. American Bank Center is allowing us to lease this building from them while we are making those changes and the transition over to the new building. Commissioners, you have that lease in front of you. Are there any questions for Mr. Winningham on this commercial rental lease? This has been reviewed by Mrs. Winko. Any questions on the lease?
Mrs. Wanko, is there anything you'd like to highlight or that you think we should?
Commissioner Oderman, I will just say that the lease has been drafted and reviewed in conjunction with myself as well as the Council for American Bank Center and standard terms and conditions of any commercial rent agreement. So nothing out of the ordinary that I have any cause for concern over.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Not, I look for a motion on this lease.
Mr. President, I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further questions or comments for city staff? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move into our reports, which are item H. First up is a retreat date. Mr. Winningham, you have some information.
And Mr. President and Commissioners, the dates that we've calendared for March 30th would be a date that we can go and somewhat sequester into the Veterans Pavilion and discuss some of the future visions of the city and goals and potential outcomes, and ultimately to receive guidance from the commissioners during that day-long event. And so I just offered that initially as the date. There's some considerations for that date that is, right during the spring, essentially Easter holiday, and so we just want to get something on the calendar and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham on the March 30th date for the retreat?
All-day event, time frame, like during the day? 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, or so I can mark it off on my calendar?
So, Commissioner Oderman, it is up for discussion. I think the timeline should be somewhere that it gives at least 8 hours discussion. So that could be as late as we want to go. It could be evening time. It could be start early. Just looking for some guidance for that. That way, we can also have lunch and then have some good topics go back and forth from our departments and set some future calendar vision.
I prefer we start at like 7 if possible.
7 in the evening, I like that also.
Yes.
With the AM.
Yeah.
Oh, AM, right.
Oh, 700.
Okay. Very well, very good. Touche.
I guess a consideration for the parents in the crowd here that have children, they have to be at X, Y, and Z. I'm up at 5 a.m. I mean, I don't think you guys want to start at 5, but, you know, it's like, whatever.
I'm a morning person, so
Yeah.
get me early.
I'm not a morning person, but my kids are up at that time. So.
Well, the normal work hours for city staff are 7:30.
Oh.
Am I correct? Except for our public safety and public works, they have the hours that as needed. So, I mean, we can start at
7:30 is fine.
7:30.
That way, if there may be some time left in the day, if we get through it. But.
So, Mr. President, we can use 7:30 as the initial start time, and then I will develop an agenda and some ideas, and then I will send it out for your comments. And that way we can make some adjustments.
Rita, are you going to secure the building, or do I need to? That doesn't matter, so, okay. All right, that'll be at the Veterans Pavilion. Worked out pretty good last time there, so.
Good day.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this day.
Yeah, so I am too. All right, the next item up, we have the Dickinson Press Award.
Now, Mr. President and Commissioners, in light of our previous public comments, I still would like to recognize for 2021 Best of the Western Edge, voted by the people in the Dickinson Press survey, that we were voted the best garbage service for 2021. So congratulations to our city staff, to our Public Works Director, and to Mr. Aaron Prowse for his dedicated service to the city, and this will go in his staff's file, or at least something they can hang on the wall. Just wanted to recognize that in a public way.
Congratulations.
Nice job.
Congratulations. I know there's a lot of deserving individuals throughout the city that received some awards through this, and there's a new award, as we brought up at the last commission meeting. Now Stark County will start awarding individuals. If you see any individuals out there that are deserving, I fully encourage you to submit their names. I think this is a great thing, and start instilling a little bit of pride. People are stepping up and fulfilling their roles or the needs of the community, be it Dickinson or the whole county. So kudos to everyone, and good work. Public Works, they're doing a good job. We'll fix that young lady's problem. So. Next up, we have HR Coordinator Namanuk. She has the hiring journal.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. First on the list is Clerk of Court. We've had a few changes in there with the retirement of our past Clerk of Court. We did fill that position internally. A solid waste landfill operator. We did make an offer to one individual. Deputy Clerk of Court 2, because of the internal opening, that opened up the Clerk of Court 2. That was filled by an internal candidate as well. Water utility operator, we had 2 positions there, and those were both filled with 2 of our, at one point, were seasonal employees for us. One of them was in a facility operator role as a full-time employee, and the other one was still a seasonal employee. So that's always nice to see that they stick around and want to work for us full-time. Police officer, we have 2 openings. They have been moved to a second interview. We had opened the environmental pretreatment coordinator position. That was a new position for water utilities. Did not have a lot of luck getting qualified candidates for that position. We did do some interviews. We had 5 applicants that we interviewed. We're going to bring one of them in for a second interview, and that individual had already taken another position elsewhere. So we're kind of rethinking our plan on that right now, if we'll reopen or what the plan will be. The chief water reclamation facility operator, again, as we expected, not a easy position to fill. We did have 9 applicants apply for the position. None of them met the minimum requirements for the position. We have extended the closing date to February, so we're still taking applications for it. Has not been an easy position to try to get candidates for. And then again, the deputy clerk of court position, because we had 2 internal candidates move up. The deputy clerk of court 1 position was a part-time position. We've changed that to a full-time position, and actually she just started this week, so she is on board. Utilities manager, we had 3 applicants that we were going to extend interviews to. One of them declined an interview, so we have 2 interviews set up for Friday or tomorrow for Skype interviews for that. We had a senior water utility position that was opened internally only, and they did interviews today for that. Engineering technician position was open due to a retirement. Those interviews are being scheduled. And then we had 3 positions that were opened up on the same day. Facility operator, as I'd mentioned, that position closes tomorrow. The street maintenance operator position closes tomorrow. We've got 2 positions there to fill. And then the property appraiser technician, we had a retirement in that department, so we've got that position open, and that closes tomorrow. And then we've got a whole bunch of new positions that we're working on getting open. Had a couple retirements in the communication specialist position, so we've got 3 openings for that department. Police officer, we're have several openings in the police department. So we've got that open, or getting that open, I should say. The bookmobile librarian, again, we're going to open that internally. Solid waste had a couple operator positions open. We've decided to move them to laborers to kind of start them out in a lower position, give them some training, get a CDL, and then start training them into operator positions, hopefully. And then water utility, depending on the outcome of that senior water utility operator interview today, we'll probably have a water utility operator opening. And then the seasonal paleontology assistant position is going to be open this week. So it won't be long, we'll be opening all of our seasonal positions. So HR is pretty busy right now with openings. Any questions on any of those positions?
Thank you, Mrs. Nominick. Any questions?
Do we have any alarming trends in regards to why the turnover's taken place?
You know, we've had several retirements, quite a few, 4 of them real recently. That's the biggest thing. I wouldn't say anything alarming.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mrs. Nominick?
And just, Mr. President, Commissioners, and just to kind of follow up with that question, what Ms. Nominick and I have been able to do is take all the exit interviews also, and we are really thoroughly looking at whether there are trends or it's just somewhat just timing based on people's considerations for moving. Some have to do with relocation, and if it's a spouse or someone who loses their job and needs to move. There's been a few of those, but I think I haven't seen anything that is alarming, but we are absolutely looking for within our staff process if somewhere we're missing some of that, and so we can right size primarily water reclamation, and we sought to grow pretty well with our certifications, and we're trying to look and see if maybe we have extended those certifications a little too high based on our population. And so with our Public Works Director and with HR, I think we're moving in the right direction. I just think we have an opportunity to get to do the right hires at this point, since we have so many opportunities.
And, Mr. Winningham, I appreciate that. And that was my next question that I was going to ask was, when we're disqualifying these applications because they don't meet minimum requirements, sometimes job descriptions have pretty steep minimum requirements. And we might have the right candidate, but maybe they don't meet one minimum requirement. And so how well do we comb through these applicants to maybe find that diamond in the rough that is open to meeting that last requirement, but at this time, they don't necessarily meet that requirement?
Ms. Nominick answer some of this, but a trend that I've noticed based on our staff talks is that we've been given a lot of applicants that would apply based on using NeoGov. That gives us a tremendous reach because it's nationwide. So we get a number of applicants that look credible in the terms of sort of qualifications. And then when it gets to the business end of hiring or looking for interviews, I think people really start to try to consider if they're going to move here. And so then that's when we have to, and we get a lot of then no's when we get close to that hiring process. And it's incredibly time consuming, with 3 individuals in HR. So that's the lane we're looking into based on qualifications and whether we can reduce some of the qualifications in the current applicants that we have. It's hard to do that after the fact. It's almost as if we're accepting a lower criteria based on the applicants, and we'd rather continue to maintain, if we can keep the pressure, the high criteria before we down select to who's ever available. That is the tension between talent management and hiring the wrong person. So that's what I would offer.
And we have done some creative things too with some of our hires, especially some of our internal applicants. We had an individual that we put in a senior role who wasn't quite at that qualification level, and we gave him a certain period of time to get that certification in his offer letter, and he met that, and then he became, a full-fledged senior operator. So we are doing some of those things, but in the water department, it is a little bit difficult because they do require certain class of certification. Sure, yeah. And, maybe we can bend it a little bit, but we still need to know that they have some experience, which will allow them to test for those certifications.
And just for the general public, our facilities and our services are not at risk. We are able to operate as we stand with the individuals we have. So that's why we are taking our time and making sure we do get the right people. So again, thank you, city staff, for the hard work you're doing on this in HR and throughout all the departments, which leads us right into Ms. Annan, our library director, and she has some exciting news and some updates on our library expansion. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners, for your time this evening. So it's been a little while since I updated all of you on what has been going on with our library expansion project planning, and I just thought today we'll give you a little update and talk briefly about next steps and some things we'll be looking for City Commission guidance regarding. So I'm here today on behalf of both the Library Foundation as well as the library. Oh, and it went. Good for me. Sometimes I have trouble with this clicker. So just very quickly to go back and review a little bit of what some of our main considerations are, the things that we're hoping problems to address with the expansion of the library facility. First being a creation of a dedicated space for children's programming. I think our children's programs, actually we're seeing thousands of views of them even while we're doing them virtually online. And when we have it in person, it's a crowded room where it's difficult to hear, short of space, short of all kinds of things. We would like to have a space that's specific just for our children's programs, where we're not competing for space with community needs and other things like that. Something that's designed for that purpose. So we're also looking for dedicated spaces to do STEAM programming. The library has taken many steps in that direction, that programming is popular and needed, but we're doing it in spaces that were not originally designed for that purpose. Other things that we're looking to do with this expansion is to relocate our adult nonfiction collection from the children's level. The idea being that that entire level would be dedicated just to children's services, no reason for stray adults or other people to be there who are not there with their children. Really make it a dedicated and a safe environment that's designed specifically for the kids. We are looking for doing a better job of providing the community meeting spaces that most libraries provide. Our community room, as you all know, is minimally available to the community because we have it filled with library programming so much of the time. Our small group and individual workspaces are all gone. They've been taken up for some of our additional library staff and for other purposes, so we don't have anything like that left at all. Also, we'd love to have a space that is available where programming, both library programming and community events, can take place outside of normal library hours, so we wouldn't have to staff the entire facility while things go on in the evening or on a Sunday. If we expand out in that direction, of course, the Twice Sold Tales bookstore is there, so that's needed to be an important part of the conversation. Staff space, we've added staff as our community has grown. The places that we had to put them did not grow, so we really crammed in. We're also looking at doing a better job with more green space and for doing outdoor programming, especially in the summertime. And those conversations always have to include parking because everything always includes parking. And because if people come to your programs, they've got to park somewhere, right? So you all have seen the plans that were approved to continue developing for the expansion and the remodel. We envision that this would happen in probably at least 2 phases, maybe more like 3. We are committed to, as that goes forward, to continue to offer library services. We don't envision closing the library altogether for a year or something, as many places do. We hope to not do that, and doing a phased approach is part of how that can happen. So when we're talking about phase 1, we're looking at the actual expansion out to the south where the ARC building used to be and where Twice Sold Tales is now. And part of what would be there, and these are some architects' renderings of what some of those spaces might look like. One is for a tiered auditorium. The intention for that being that it would be a great space for author talks, for movie showings, for things like the musical groups that we've had in, where hopefully you can both see and hear better than you can in the current community room. You don't see it real well on this slide, but there is a little stage space up at the front. We'd love to see things like children's theater done in there, and we very much envision this being a space that's available for the community to use when the library is not programming it. The other thing that is intended to go into that South Side addition, there's a few other things, but the other big one is what we're calling a maker place. This is something that many libraries are incorporating. It is a space that's designed particularly for doing STEAM programming, for doing arts programs as well. Ours is designed such that it can be 2 smaller spaces or opened up into 1 large one. And once again, when the library isn't using this, we think it would be a great space that can be reconfigurable for a lot of purposes that hopefully the community would have lots of uses for as well. And the other things that we would accomplish then in that phase 1 would be the removal of those adult materials out of the children's area, a gallery space for our current North Dakota collections, and a place where we could have special exhibits from the State Library or the State Historical Society and things like that that are difficult to do in our current building because there's not security for those kinds of things. These are intended to be reconfigurable spaces, as I said, things that both the library and the community can use. And also, very importantly, this would already address that ability to have a space that could be open after hours without us having to staff the entire library facility. Then if we got that, once we get that done, kind of a phase 2 or a phase 1B or whatever you want to call it, once we've got those adult materials moved, it's not any additional building to remodel the children's area, which we envision. Obviously there's the remodel cost, but there isn't any actual building of walls and that sort of thing that would need to be done. This is just a rendering of what that space might look like. We're looking at a place that would be large enough to, we have had as many as 40 kids at story time, and if you're familiar with our current story time room, you can't hear at the back of that room, let's put it that way, when you have so many people, but this should work really nicely and we're excited about that idea. So just to bring forward to you some of the questions I get asked all the time, and these are important, cost projections. We've, the architect sent just those first plans that are what you have seen to both Roars and J.E. Dunn and asked for a preliminary estimate. This is not a bid by any means. To me, it was somewhat shocking, the difference in those numbers.
I was just gonna ask, there's something someone's missing?
Well, this is what I'm wondering, and part of it is Roars, as you will see, did a cost per square feet. I believe those projections got sent to all of you, so I don't know if you've had a chance to look at them, but if you will see that what they gave us was very, very different. Roars gave maybe what's a little more like what you expect with a preliminary cost estimate. J.E. Dunn did something, this isn't my field, so forgive me if I'm mistaken here, but I did something that looks closer to what you would expect with an actual bid. I think there were maybe some assumptions made in that process that I'm not sure where they got all of what was in that long spreadsheet from. They did try to also stage it out by phase, so you would have what they're projecting would be a phase 1 price. What was surprising to me, the site development, what they were projecting, the two different companies was very close, actually. So it does make you wonder. But I did send to you exactly what I have had by way of those cost projections so that you would know. It's been suggested, and I will ask our architect if Skull might take a look at those and give us a look at that too. But that's what I have to present to you, so I'm giving you the look that I've had.
Is the building, the outside, still pretty similar to what you presented in the past to us? The layout of the common area and just how it looks on the outside?
Yes.
The scope of how big it's going to be? And
yes.
Okay.
That's what these projections were made on.
And I don't know if all commissioners have that information. If you have any of those slides of how that looks, how the outside looks, and for the newer commissioners, so that they may just kind of have an idea.
I will do that, and the architect's plans as well, in case any of you don't have them anymore or haven't maybe even seen them. I will get all of those things sent. At the very end here, we do actually have just a little video that one of my staff members put together that will show. So we'll get to that in a minute. I will tell you that this one has been edited with a couple corrections since the version that I sent out to you, and there will be at least one more correction in it before it goes up on our website, but that will be happening. Just 1 second, please.
Ms. Ennon,
yes.
What's your timeline for the project kicking off? I mean, there's going to be some fundraising part of it. You kind of just give us a little lay of what that is, or is that in the video?
No, it is,
Okay.
it is not. And if we can get back to that last slide. Because I do get this question all the time, of course, too. So fundraising efforts, and when people ask what our timeline is, I tell them all the time that that will depend on the fundraising. I think that's a frustrating answer for folks, but it's also the honest and safe one. If you want to come up with the money, we'll put the spade in the ground this spring. But, but in the meantime, there's a lot of things to think about, and the feedback that we need from you as commissioners as well as others before we can give a more firm date. But in the meanwhile, things that have been being done or what that we're looking at. So the foundation has created a new website that has a link to a GoFundMe on it and to other information, so they're getting ready to do some kickoff fundraising events there. Just for everyone to know, the foundation has purchased the properties that this will, the expansion will be built on, and are in the process of wanting to donate those properties to the city, because of course that needs to be done. Just to let you all know, the foundation is about $470,000 in on this project already, just with those two properties that they purchased. So we thank them for that and for their continued support. We are going to be looking at grants and some other things. There is a large grant that they've done some research on. It's from the National Endowment for the Humanities, so a federal grant. It is specific for infrastructure or for building, which a lot of them are not. This one is for a maximum amount of $750,000. If it is going to be applied for, it will have to be applied for by the city, because as would be the entity that needs to do that. And there's a lot to it. It's a complicated grant. It's open for just a couple of months here, so it opens in March and closes in May, but has typically opened at about this time every year. So if we couldn't get it ready for this year, we could certainly be working or trending towards next year. One of the exciting things about that grant is they do allow you to use up to 10% of those funds for fundraising, which there are a lot of grants that don't do that. But it does require either, depending on which way you go with the grant, it does require either a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 match. That would be a challenge for the foundation, because whatever funds the city puts towards it, that doesn't count in the match. You have to do actual fundraising matching. So anyway, that is one that's out there. There are others we're looking at, so I will be looking for some direction from all of you, and certainly from other city staff about how we should move forward with that. There is USDA loan that we've been told we would be eligible for, but once again, that is something that the city would have to be the signatory, would be the one that applies for it. The rates on those things look great right now, if that was something that you ever wanted to consider. I put City of Dickinson ? And that's one of the things that I'm asking of you. I know you can't just answer me that tonight, or maybe you can, that would be great. But we do need to know in a more official way what the city is committing. We've gone and presented to Stark County. We can go back to them again, but they of course want to know what the city's commitment is. I have made the preliminary request of them. I'd like to see them match you, but whether they would or not, of course, that's a whole other thing. You do know that we are supported by 2 other counties, so we'd like to go to Billings County and Slope County, possibly even up to Dunn County. We have a lot of Dunn County residents that use our library. But before we go out to all of those other places, being able to take something along that says this is what the city has committed would be very helpful. And for that matter, as we go forward with fundraising plans, asking other donors, the city's show of support is very, very meaningful. So that's...
I'm looking at like our retreat time frame. Is that appropriate for you for us to formulate an answer and get back to you around that, or is that too late, March 30th?
I think that would be terrific. You know, if you wanted to commit to something tonight, like I said, I know that I know that can't happen. But yes.
We better have some very strong coffee at 7:30 in the morning and talk about this. So.
But yes, and I know that the foundation and the library board will be really pleased if I can go back and tell them that you all will be discussing this at your retreat, and that we'll have something to go forward with. So if you give me one more minute of your time, sure. Just this is kind of the exciting part, maybe. So anyway, that will be up on the library's website and on the foundation website tomorrow or the next day. And thank you all so much for your time.
Frederick had a point here, and he kind of jarred my memory. Ms. Walla can probably help with this. I think we've had this discussion. What we were going to give to the Theodore Roosevelt Library, we had committed to you. I think we had that, right? The $3 million, that discussion that we had committed?
Yes, President Decker. During our last year's budget processing, we did talk about that. What we were going to give TR Library is what we were looking at. We never made a commitment on it or anything, but I still think that that $3 million is what the number that I still have in my books on the sales tax worksheet is what we were going to look at. But we never did, and I also put there was no commitment yet because we didn't know what the amount was coming to. So.
But I you know, Commissioner Frederick had that. I do remember that now. So I think that's going to be around your ballpark figure, but we'll have that further discussion in March. So.
Awesome. And then, as I said, the foundation is specifically looking for something where you say that you've made that commitment and we can take that forward as we do further fundraising.
And for the general public, at the time, we had also fronted the Theodore Roosevelt Library $300,000, which they did return to us. So we did get that check, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yep.
It was received in December 2020.
Wonderful.
So
For
thank
sure
you.
you're getting 300.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep. So that completes administration and finance. We have nothing from public safety this evening or engineering, nothing from public works. We'll move into planning. Mr. Hadley.
Been patiently waiting back there.
We have a couple special use permits.
Yes, good evening, President Decker and the Commission. First item is a special use permit for the replacement of an existing tank on an industrial site, 6,000 gallon tank to an 18,000 gallon tank. Site is located at 11053 32nd Street Southwest. It's in the ETZ, north part of the county, north part of our ETZ. The Planning Commission heard this item at the January meeting. There wasn't anybody in attendance against the application. The Planning Commission recommended approval with conditions. There's 7 conditions of approval that go along with that, and this would be Resolution 05-2021.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions for Mr. Hadley on 05-2021? Like Mr. Hadley said, this was heard by Planning and Zoning, and there was no opposition to this going from a 6,000 gallon propane storage tank to 18,000 from any of the neighboring businesses or residents. So there are no questions or comments. I'd look for a motion on 05-2021.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman. Second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Hadley, you have another special use permit. This is for the installation and operation of a cellular facility mounted on the existing structure located at 41 East Villard Street, better known as the Ivanhoe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This would be Resolution 06-2021. This also was heard at the Planning Commission meeting in January, and it has 18 conditions of approval. It's been a number of months and seems like years going through this process. The applicant has worked with the property owner, and if you look through the numbers of conditions there, they're pretty specific to that site, and I think it buttons it up. It will clean up not only that site, but also the structure. I think at the planning meeting, there was a question on what the cable covering would look like. That is actually the plan that were submitted by the applicant, and you can see that the cabling, whether it be in the north side of the building or the south side, which I believe was talked about as well, it would be covered with that same covering and would not be visible. So there wouldn't be any visible cabling whatsoever. As I said, the Planning Commission approved this. There wasn't any opposition at that hearing either. Staff would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions for Mr. Hadley on Resolution 06-2021?
Have we talked to them about a pigeon mitigation?
A what?
Pigeon mitigation on that building somehow? I mean, even today, there was like probably 500 pigeons up there on the edge.
We haven't, Commissioner. No, we haven't. We can certainly add condition number 19 if you'd like.
Well, I don't know if it's something we want to
Well, I don't know if
formally add, but
I don't know if that's AT&T's problem. That's probably
yeah,
Shortheim's.
need an owl.
No.
Or those sound machines like they have in other neighborhoods.
So, I just noticed there's a lot of pigeons on top of that building right now. So
In past experiences, Commissioner, in other communities, that's a tough thing to try to enforce. And there's both sides that look at enforcing it and removing them, and it is a tough thing to nail down. But if you'd like to entertain that, we certainly can.
Is it just because they make a mess, or why?
I think there's a lot of facilities dealing with right now. This winter has not been pushing birds further south, so a lot of birds are staying here and making a mess. I don't know if you've been into the West River Center lately, but it is quite the sight, the entrance there. So I know the power washer's been out more than one day. So it's just something to have to deal with. Back to this, 06-2021. This is the special use permit and for the installation and the operation of a cellular facility on an existing structure located at 41 East Villard Street.
Mr. President, I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. Any further questions for city staff? Comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Hadley.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Building Code and Enforcement. Has no report this evening. We have covered number 9, public comments. Move on to Commissioners. Item 10, Commissioners, is there anything that it was not on the agenda or any items that we need to be aware of that you would like to speak to?
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman.
I'd like to extend a happy 21st birthday to
21st. I heard it was 31st. Now you guys are making him younger and younger. Pretty soon you won't be able to go celebrate. Happy birthday.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Any other items, Commissioners? Not, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
We are adjourned.